All right, let's just go ahead and get started for sake of time. People can continue rolling in, but this will be recorded. So if anyone misses anything, it'll be uploaded to our website soon enough. So I'm just going to go ahead and kick it off and say hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us for our very first SGEU's very first webinar. My name is Amanda, and I'm going to be the MC tonight. I am a graduate student in geography and public administration at SU. So this past spring, we held an election and became an officially recognized union with a 95% union yes vote. And what that means for us now is we have the power to collectively bargain for a contract, and that will be the next step for our union. So the purpose of this webinar series we have ongoing this summer is to talk about the process of bargaining and what to expect in this upcoming year. So before we begin our webinar tonight, I do just want to start with a few housekeeping matters. So first, I just want to ask that members of the audience, so if you're not in the bargaining committee, if you could please keep your videos off and also your audio on mute. That way, if you want, you can use the view setting, high non-video participants, and that way you'll only see our bargaining committee tonight. So we just ask again, if you're in the audience, please keep your audio and video muted. We will not be having a live Q&A today for today's webinar. Rather, when we asked people to register in advance, you were able to ask a question, and we have that list of questions, and we will hope to get to as many as we can at the end of the webinar if we have time. If you have more questions, or if you develop more questions while you're here tonight, you can save those because we're going to have more webinars this summer. So keep those in the back of your mind, and we'll try to get to them as we go on. And so again, just please, if you're in the audience, video and audio off, and we will not be having a live Q&A today. So with that, we're just going to go ahead and get started. So today, the purpose of the webinar is to introduce us to our newly elected bargaining committee. These 12 individuals, we're missing one today, he's out of town, but the 12 individuals were elected in May, and they will serve as our representatives at the negotiation table. So to start off our webinar, we're going to hear short introductions from each one of them. And bargaining committee, as I call on your name, if you could please introduce yourself and then also tell us what you're most excited to see in a contract. And just to be mindful of time, if you could please keep your answers to 90 seconds, that would be great. So I'm just, as I call on you, please introduce yourself. All right, we'll start with Bridget.
Oh, okay, I'm first. Hi guys, my name is Bridget Mack. I use she, they pronouns, and I am a PhD student here over in the physics building. I am a research assistant over here. And I look forward to seeing this contract come to fruition. I'm excited to see especially more support for people who have experienced like discrimination or harassment or anything, and also just general like healthcare and mental health support. Yeah.
Thanks, Bridget. We'll go on to Heijo now.
Hi, yeah, my name is Heijo Kim. I'm going to be a second year PhD student at the Earth and Environmental Sciences Department. One of the exciting new things that I really want to see in our contract is I think we could, well, the biggest thing for me is probably going to be like an academic year contracts. So instead of getting the 9 months, just the full year, including summer.
Okay, thanks, Heijo. Cassidy.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Cassidy Thomas. I'm going into my 4th year as a PhD of social science student over in Maxwell School. Aside from things like better pay, obviously, one of the things I'm really looking forward to hopefully acquiring through this first contract is just more transparency in like how decisions are made actually in our that impact our employment conditions, and how our departments actually make decisions that impact our TA, GA, RA assignments, things like that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Cassidy. And now we'll go on to Lauren.
Hi, my name's Lauren. I use she, her pronouns, and I just finished my master's in geography, and I'm starting my PhD in sociology in the fall in Maxwell. I'm super excited to be here with you all. And I think, the most basic thing that I'm most excited to see in our new contract is more pay. So many most graduate students are living and graduate workers are kind of living with poverty wages and are unable to afford basic things like rent and groceries, let alone, things that allow you to enjoy yourself. So I think that's like the biggest thing for me is just making sure that everyone is paid fairly so that everyone can is able to thrive in their grad programs.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. And Bhargavi.
Oh, hello, everyone. My name is Bhargavi Parthasarathy. I use she, her pronouns. I am a math PhD, I'm a PhD student in the math department. And something I'm excited to see in the new contract is, I'm excited to see a contract that represents all our varying needs across all departments and, takes care of us so that we can do research best, which is what we're here to do.
Great. Thanks, Bhargavi. Roger.
I'm Roger, year 4. Oh, no, I added a year. 5th year student in philosophy. And the thing that I am looking forward to is having the contract that respects us both as students and as workers. And whatever we think our needs are as students, we can get that, and whatever needs that we have as workers, we will get that in the contract. And I'm glad to be working on doing something like this.
Great. And now we'll go to Joe.
Hello. My name is Joe Beckman. I'm a 4th year math department PhD student. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a TA. One thing that I want to see in the contract is more support for international students. I've heard from a lot of my colleagues that, especially like when relocating, many people are down to like their last penny, and then they still have to have 2 weeks before they're actually get a paycheck. And I think that the university could do more to help these students transition to working here.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And now we'll do Jenna.
Hi, I'm Jenna Walmer. I'm going to be a 3rd year in the social psychology PhD program. And I use she, her pronouns. And one thing that I'm excited to see, everyone's really covered a lot of the things I'm excited to see, but higher pay, more transparency, and better healthcare and mental health care.
All right. Thank you, Jenna. Sujin.
Hi, my name is Sujin Green. I'm a 5th year PhD candidate in the English department, and I'll be working as a TA in the Women and Gender Studies department this coming year. And I'm most excited to see better support throughout the summer months. I know that's been mentioned, but something that I know is a big deal for many of us, making the 9 months work for the full calendar year, and for just increased mental health support for graduate students.
All right, awesome. Hayden.
Hi, I'm Hayden. I am going into my 2nd year in the sociology program. I go by he, him pronouns, and I'm a TA. I'm going to be teaching social theory next year, real fun stuff. And what I'm most excited for in the contract is, getting better support for parents that are grad students. I think, it is debilitating if you don't have children, and it is even more so on these wages if you do. And just kind of like upping some of these paltry sort of supports that parents are currently given, and just, making sure that those parents are able to continue their schooling and supply for their children as well.
All right, thanks, Hayden. And last but not least, Sadie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sadie. I am going into my 5th year. I'm a PhD student in the chemistry department. Pronouns are she, her. And I think one of the things that I am most excited to see in a contract is workplace protections, amongst other things that have already been listed tonight. But I'm hoping, these workplace protections are going to look like, physical forms in terms of improving facilities so that buildings have AC when students are expected to work over the summer, or I think just guidelines and expectations that are held accountable both ways for us as workers and as students, and then also for the people that we work for.
Awesome. Thank you, Sadie. And thank you, everyone on our working committee. Thank you for the introductions. If people want to know more about our bargaining committee members, including Sergio, who is not able to be here today, you can read their full bios on our website, syracusegradsunited.org. We have a whole page with all their bios, including their emails, if you need to contact them with a question about the bargaining process or anything else you might have a question about. So just keep that in mind as we keep going on tonight. I also will say thank you all for people who joined us during those introductions. And just to reiterate our housekeeping rules, if you could please keep your audio and video muted during this webinar. And we will have a Q&A section, but it won't be a live Q&A section. It'll be drawn from the questions that people submitted when they registered tonight. So, but before we get there, we're going to go into a couple questions that a couple of us have curated tonight, discussing the bargaining process and the bargaining committee. So bargaining committee, after I read a question, if you want to answer that, you can go ahead and just raise your hand using the Zoom feature, and I'll call on you as that goes on. So we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. So our first question is, what is the bargaining committee? So I see Lauren, and then I'll do Jenna afterwards. So Lauren, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. So the bargaining committee, or sometimes you might see or hear this as BC for short, is a group of 12 SGEU members, so Syracuse Graduate Employees United members, 11 of which are here today, who are nominated and then elected by the SGEU membership this past spring, just right at the end of the semester, to engage in collective bargaining with the administration. So these bargaining committee members span the social sciences, humanities, and STEM disciplines, and will represent SGEU alongside an SEIU, so our parent union, attorney at the table in negotiations with SU administration during this coming year. The committee was nominated and elected by having 2 representatives for STEM, 2 for social science, 2 for humanities, an international student representative, and 5 at-large member positions to try and span the breadth of our kind of needs and programs of study here at the university.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Jenna, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, just to let you all know what we're working on. So the bargaining committee has the responsibility to be coordinating with other member representatives to communicate updates from the negotiations and the bargaining process, as well as receiving input on contract priorities and proposal agreements via surveys, questionnaires, and direct conversations with the SEIU unit.
All right, thanks, Lauren and Jenna. That was a really thorough answer. So our second question for today is, what is a contract? We're talking a lot about negotiating a contract, but what is a contract and what's in a contract? Okay, we already got some people. We'll do Hayden and then Bridget.
Cool. Yeah. So a collective bargaining agreement, or CBA, they're kind of going to be different based on the different bargaining units. So what is the workplace going to look like? What is like the positions that are working? They're all going to differ. So contracts are going to differ depending on that. So like in other contracts at other universities like Columbia, Harvard, some of the things that unis have negotiated for is like wages, workloads, hours, those sorts of things. And then some pieces of a contract are standard, kind of based on labor law itself. The NLRB is, or NLRA rather, if you want to look at that, kind of like outlines a lot of that stuff. And what is considered permissible to bargaining, such as salary and or stipend pay, healthcare, plan design, pensions, workplace safety and protections, paid time off, layoff, and recall to work, professional enrichment, and tuition reimbursement are all kind of like included within that. So if the SU administration refuses to bargain over the subjects that I've kind of just chatted about, then we have the right to kind of pull in the NLRB and the unfair labor practices in order to have them come to the table and actually discuss those issues.
All right, Bridget, and do you want to add on to that?
Yeah. So Hayden mentioned a bunch of different things that could be in a contract. I just wanted to mention that there are, besides these standard sort of subjects, we can also, the union contract, we can also negotiate things like cost of living adjustments, provisions over discrimination on race, sex, gender, etc., and also provisions for reimbursement for visa-related fees and travel for international students, things like that. So very broad.
All right, thank you, Hayden and Bridget. And so now we know generally who the bargaining committee is, what they're doing, and also what a contract is. How long can we expect the bargaining process to take? we'll go, okay, Roger. We'll start with Roger and then I'll call on someone afterwards.
Yeah. So yeah, the timeline's gonna take it's gonna be depending on a lot of things, right? We expect that it's gonna be, taking a while, just given all the stuff that we're talking about, right? But you can see that this kind of has like 4 parts, right? So where we are right now is like in the process of negotiation, right? So during the organizing campaign, SGEU, us, we worked with other members of different bargaining units, units that aren't like, let's say, affiliated with SU, undergrad groups, registered RSOs, people in local governments, and within the community of Syracuse at large, right? And, trying to put pressure on the university to say, hey, like, let us talk and let us come to the bargaining table, and let's do this in a reasonable amount of time, and also be in good faith with us when we're negotiating. So that's one aspect, but I'll let other people talk about other things more.
Okay, great. Thanks, Roger. Hey, Joe, would you like to pick up from where he left off about the negotiation stage?
Yeah, just to kind of add on just to the kind of this phase in general. We have to make sure that as a union, as SGU, that we are consistent kind of before preparing for the bargaining phase and also during the entire bargaining phase. We really want to present a united front on a lot of the core issues that we want to be prioritized in our new contract. Of course, this means for us as the bargaining committee to have regular communication channels with all of our members, and having members also engage with us in our designated bargaining survey, which we will touch on later. But another really important fact is like also kind of understanding who's going to be at the other end of the table. So understanding some of the core values and principles that SU administration is going to hold on to, what their leadership and financial structures are, as well as what are the potential operating constraints. It is really important to kind of get that kind of understanding so that we know kind of where to strategize our own priorities. So where can we pressure the administration? Where do we want to back off and potentially kind of renegotiate or sacrifice certain portions of it? But we won't know that unless we do a lot of preparation.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tejo. So that's where we are now. I guess now we want to know, what comes next in this timeline. So let's go ahead with Sadie.
Thanks. Yeah. So stage 2 is really, we're talking about bargaining. And when we think about bargaining and negotiation, they sound like very, very similar words. So the big difference in this context between bargaining and negotiation is collective bargaining is what happens at the table. So it's a legally structured process, and it's designed to kind of like formalize the agreement between the parties and produce something that is legally enforceable. So in this case, our contracts. And then I just want to emphasize that negotiation is a broader process. It happens between 2 agents with the power to make decisions. And the law requires that the employer sends representatives to the table who are knowledgeable enough and within power to engage in meaningful discussion, and who are authorized to make these binding agreements on the company's behalf. Regardless, it's still important for us to remember that the company's real decision makers are rarely, if ever, sitting at the bargaining table. So the real negotiations are not necessarily happening at the table. And so this is where that difference comes between collective bargaining and negotiation. But during this process of bargaining, what you can expect from us are regular updates on bargaining from the bargaining committee to the larger membership unit. And then also things like these webinars where we'll be holding regular education initiatives and opening up dialogue for everyone to stay in the loop and knowledgeable on what is happening. And then also voting spaces for the entire membership on bargaining strategy, also on priorities and expectations, because at the end of the day, this contract needs to be reflective of all of our needs, and it is our contracts.
Awesome. Thanks, Sadie. Very well said. So after the bargaining table, what is the next phase? We will go on to Joe to answer this part.
Yeah, so once we've bargained on every single one of the topics that we want to bargain on, then we write up a legally binding contract. And this is what's called a tentative agreement. Sometimes it's abbreviated to TA. It's not in effect at this point. When we eventually get there, it won't be in effect yet. But what we would do with it is we would present it to everybody in the SGEU unit, and then everybody who's in SGEU can then say, I like this, or I don't want this. And you can accept or deny it.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So once we have a TA and we put it to vote, how do we get from there to an actual contract? So I see Sujin, and then hey, Joe, if you have something to add, I'll get to you after Sujin.
Awesome. Yeah. So after the tentative agreement stage, we kind of move into the final stage of ratification and implementation. So this stage of voting with the wider membership is known as ratification. So if the tentative agreement is voted down, the bargaining committee returns to the table with management in order to reinforce the core member issues which were not satisfactory in the tentative agreement. So once tentative agreement is voted in by the wider union membership, and this would be by a simple majority voting arrangement, the contract takes effect. So then elected union officials and representatives have the responsibility to ensure that the agreement of the contract is upheld by the employer throughout its agreed duration until the next contract is negotiated.
Okay, great, Sujin. So what I'm hearing from all those answers is that there's a lot of steps involved, and it's understandable that it might take a while to get through this process. Hey, Joe, do you have something to add to this question?
Yeah, so just kind of commenting on the fact that, there are going to be a lot of components to the contract, and also, like I just said, there's so many steps. So just to kind of give a little bit of context of like how long some of these negotiations can take. I believe Illinois State University started negotiations for contract renewal. They already had a contract before. Usually, I think a contract can last anywhere between like 3 to 5 years. And they started to have some talks or schedule some dates around like March 2nd, 2023. And it is still ongoing. Everyone knows what's going on at University of Michigan. GEO members actually started negotiations like during their fall semesters, like November of last year, and we're starting to work on proposals for their new contract during that entire semester. But as we all know, no contracts are still agreed on. And also at MIT, MIT also voted to form a union last year, and they're still undergoing negotiations. So these are just a couple examples. No disrespect to the other universities that we didn't mention, but this is a very lengthy, this is going to take a very long time.
Okay, thank you all for answered that question about the timeline of what we can expect for bargaining starting soon, I'm imagining. But during this process that we were just talking about, Lauren mentioned earlier that we have our parent organization, SGEU, who has supported us through our campaign this past year with staff organizers and monetary support to hold social events and stuff. So what will their role be now that we're in the bargaining stage? Anyone can feel free to answer. All right, we'll do Cassidy.
Yeah, hey everyone. So yeah, like Lauren mentioned earlier, SGEU, which stands for Service Employees International Union, they are, for lack of a better term, kind of like our parent union. SGEU falls under their umbrella. And one thing that's kind of important to understand about their role in the bargaining process is that it's a primarily supportive one. So the bargaining committee, which is us, we all introduced ourselves earlier, we're the ones who are going to basically help set priorities within at the negotiation table. But it's very common for unions to call in people like professional negotiators to help with these negotiations. And so in our case, we're likely going to have the assistance of the president of the local. His name is Scott Phillipson. He's probably going to be serving as our lead negotiator. And he has a legal background and has been doing negotiations like this for a long period of time. But again, it's important to understand that they're serving in a primarily supportive capacity, and it is still the bargaining committee representing all the membership that are the ones setting priorities and kind of like talking about what we want to push for in the contract. And then it's SGEU's job or their staff's job to assist us in achieving those goals.
Okay, great. Thanks, Cassidy. That was a helpful explanation. We have one more question designated from our webinar, and then we'll move into some audience questions we received. So we've mentioned multiple times tonight that it is the job of the bargaining committee to represent the interests and priorities of our membership. And one of the ways that we have been doing that is we have a bargaining survey out that we have been asking people to fill out. So I was just wondering if someone could tell us a little bit, what is a bargaining survey and how is it going to be used? All right, Bhargavi.
All right. So a bargaining survey, like the one we've been receiving emails about this past month, is one of the ways where SGEU members, so our member unit, can share their priorities for a new contract. Bargaining surveys are regularly used by unions in general ahead of contract negotiations. It's a way to understand the priorities and needs of the membership. And this allows the bargaining committee. So in our case, in the case of SGEU, us, like the 12 people on this panel today, it allows us to better represent the membership. So all of the grad workers and, during negotiation with administration. So these surveys are usually anonymous. Individual responses are not shared, but it usually helps us gauge, what the membership at large wants in this new contract, what is there, what is not there. And outside of the survey, of course, the survey is just one of the ways you could do this. Outside of the surveys, members can also always share their thoughts and priorities with their union rep or at any of the member or organizing committee meetings. Additionally, feel free to email the union email or DM SGEU on Instagram at any point of time.
Awesome, great, thanks, Bhargavi. And to that last point, I put in the chat earlier, all of the emails of our bargaining committee members here tonight are up on our website. So if you have additional input that you want to submit about your priorities for our new contract, you can also contact them that way. So I'm going to move in. We're trying to keep this to be a pretty short webinar. So I have 3 questions that we pulled from audience registrants that I'm going to ask tonight to close out our webinar. But I will just remind everyone, we will have more webinars. And if your question does go unanswered, as I just said, the emails of the bargaining committee members are there. So feel free to email them with questions or concerns. And we'll try our best to answer every questions that people have related to the bargaining process. So our first audience question, which actually flows really nicely from our last question that Bhargavi answered for us, Alice asked, how are the survey results going to be used to inform strategies and priorities? So I know, Bhargavi, you just laid out kind of what the bargaining survey is, but is there someone who feels like they can talk a little bit more specifically about how the results from that survey will be used to inform our strategy at the bargaining table? All right, Cassidy.
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Alice. So I guess a good way to think about it is that it helps provide us with a more complete picture of what's happening on this campus. So the data collected will really help us understand what the current working conditions of graduate students across a very broad variety of departments are like. What it's like working in a lab, for example, versus working as a research assistant or a TA in Maxwell versus what it's like working as an instructor of record. We collected a lot of data while we were organizing this campaign through doing one-on-one meetings with folks and having all those conversations. But still, this survey data, what it's really going to help us do is just supplement all that to make sure that we have a real accurate understanding across the entirety of the campus as opposed to more specific departments. One other thing I'll just add is that this, again, because I believe the question had talked about how it's going to inform kind of strategies and priorities when we're going into bargaining. Again, it's just going to be another piece of data that we use to reference when we are starting to draft our initial proposals that we are going to give to the school, or responding to initial proposals that the school gets us, because we want to make sure that we are obviously, as a bargaining committee and a union, meeting the needs of all members across this campus while we're at the bargaining table. And so then obviously we'll kind of use some of this data to help prioritize or focus on specific things at the bargaining table. And then we're going to be negotiating our proposals with the administration. And then like I said, hopefully in the end, this is going to result in a collective bargaining agreement or a tentative agreement that then we can then bring back to the membership, and the membership can assess for themselves as a whole whether or not they want to vote to approve or reject that contract. And then if it's a rejection, we'll continue to go back to the bargaining table, continue to collect more data on what's going on across campus, and we'll move on from there.
Okay, thank you, Cassidy. That was a really helpful add-on to what Bhargavi told us about. Our next audience question is for Michelle, and she asked, what is the plan for international students? Bhargavi?
Right. Thank you, Michelle. That's for the question. So to create a plan for the international students, right? One of the first steps we took was just to look at what other unions have been able to do, for what they've been able to win for their international students. Some of these wins, are things like reimbursement of the SEVIS fee, paid leave to participate in immigration proceedings and bereavement leave, and increased protections against bullying and harassment. So this was implemented at the University of Michigan, University of Washington, and University of Massachusetts, Amherst. Other things include improved legal resources, creation of a legal hotline where international students can call if they encounter issues crossing the border. So this is again at the University of Michigan. So at the University of Chicago, they've been able to get guaranteed summer housing for international students. And at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, they've also been able to create a committee to provide support with immigration status, visa issues, and legal issues. So these are, some of the examples of things different other unions have been able to win for their international students. And this was just the first step. So we just looked at what is out there. Now, the next step, which is where we are currently at, is to just use these ideas just as inspiration, right? And decide what we as international students of SU want and need, right? What our priorities are. And to this end, results on the bargaining survey will really help determine what our priorities look like. And so because of that, it is very, 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 very important that international grad workers, all workers fill the survey, but especially international grad workers fill the survey.
Okay, thanks, Bhargavi. Yeah, I think if there's one main message from tonight, it's please fill out the bargaining survey, because is the best way, it seems like, for the bargaining committee to really represent our needs and win us a contract that works for everyone. And I will also just plug some of those examples that Bhargavi just mentioned are on our website as well. If you're on our website and you navigate to the resources and union victories, it lists out some of the things that other unions have won for international students, but also other groups such as parents and categories such as stipends. So you can see some of those examples there. The last question that we're ending on tonight is actually a really good segue to set us up for our next webinar. So Michael asked, what pushback should we expect from the administration, and what should we be prepared to do in advance? So is there anyone who wants to touch on that a little bit, but knowing also that we will be able to touch on it more later on? We can do Lauren, yeah.
Yeah, so I can start this, and excited to kind of go into this more in another webinar. But essentially, we have a lot of experience already working with administration throughout the duration of our campaign. We were successfully able to work with administration to win that election agreement that secured us a fair and speedy election, which does not happen a lot of places. And we're really optimistic that the administration will continue to bargain with us in good faith. However, we should also expect to continue to apply pressure and demonstrate our collective power, just like we did during the campaign with our public actions, like our first press conference in January and our March for Recognition later in February. It's really important that we continue to kind of organize and build power amongst ourselves to kind of secure these wins that we really want during these bargaining processes. So our next webinar, which will hopefully take place in July, will discuss more of what to expect during the bargaining process. But in the meantime, it's structurally day to day, we're still doing a lot of the same things, talking to our colleagues, building power, and really making sure that we understand what we need and what we want when we go to the table.
Great, thanks, Lauren. Yeah, so our next webinar in July is going to be kind of what to expect through the bargaining process. So talking a lot more about what you should expect, or I should expect as a member, not on the bargaining committee, what will be happening through the union, through the bargaining process. So we'll talk a lot more about that. If there were questions that you had from tonight that didn't get answered, you can save them for that next webinar. We'll have the same way for audience questions that we did this time. You also can contact the bargaining committee at any time. with further questions about, you know, if you have more about questions about the bargaining process, you can do that. I also will say after this webinar is finished, it will be recorded and uploaded to our website, so you can watch back at any time. We also will be adding an FAQ section under our bargaining tab on our website that will have written answers to all these questions if you're a more visual reader person. So with that, we kept it short tonight because we know it's, you know, a weeknight at 5:35. So we're trying to keep it short, but thank you all to everyone who came, and thank you to our bargaining committee. I know that I'm excited for this next phase of our campaign. So without further ado, we'll conclude our webinar for now. Thank you all for joining, and we hope to see you at the next one.